Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 79, and today we have three people on the podcast, which I'm very excited about. I'm very excited to talk about the project that we're going to discuss today. And but here today we have Chris Nichols, Daniel Thron, and Erick Shield, and we are on episode 79. As I said, if you enjoy this episode, we will have another one in a couple of weeks. You can check out more about CG Pro at becomecgpro.com. We also have a free Facebook group. And as CG Pro is a school, we have an open day coming up on October the 10th, which has a Joker theme. And we'll be making something from the Joker world. So if you want to come and see how it was done, come join us on our open day. So to today's episode, I'm in great company here. We have three wonderful gentlemen who have just done something that's pretty pioneering in the world of virtual production. They are Erick, who was a writer. Each one of these people was a writer on the project, and we also have they also have other things that they do other than the project. So Chris is the director of the Chaos Innovation Labs and something like that, and he's been around for quite some time in the world of visual effects and has evolved into working with Chaos Group a lot, among other things. That he runs the CG Garage podcast that I've had the privilege of being on as well. And all three of them together are on Martini Giant, which is another great podcast that talks about film. And so that's I'm going to very quickly pass this over to you guys to introduce yourselves, because I'm going to you're going to do a much better job of it than I am. So why don't you each say just a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we'll start that way. So
sure,
Chris.
I'll start off. Thank you, Ed, for first of all for having us. Very excited to be on. I'm really excited about what you guys have been doing. You and Jackie have made something pretty incredible together, and I'm really proud that we can talk about this project with you guys amongst many things. So my name is Chris Nichols, as you said, and I do run the CG Garage podcast, which is coming up on 500 episodes. So I'm very proud of that.
Wow. You should be. Amazing.
And I also run another podcast with these two knuckleheads called Martini Giant, which is our passion for the movies, not just visual effects, but just the entire movie industry in general, which we're really, really excited about. My day job is director of special projects at the Chaos Innovation Lab. What we have done on this project is a part of the Innovation Lab was developing something called Project Arena, which is a brand new virtual production tool that is closely tied to V-Ray and Vantage, real-time ray tracing. And we'll talk a little bit about the details of that. But we produced a short together called Ray Tracing for the Win. We were all writers on it, and I was a producer on it. I'll pass it on to Erick. Erick, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you did, Chris, on the projects. Yeah.
My name is Erick Shield. I am an artist. I've been a CG artist. I worked with these guys for 25, 30 years as a CG artist. I am also on the podcast. I wrote this with the guys, and I design all the sets and so forth. And the look, partly the look, and I am a freelance artist. So I do my own thing. I write my own material too, like Dan does and Chris does. And I have clients and I just work for them. And, after all these years, still do CG work. But my main thing was a 3D artist, 3D lighting, shading. So that's what I do. And being involved in Martini Giant, we've kind of held a lot of hats, but I do a lot of all the branding for Martini Giant, and I do all the face replacements. It's something I've always done. And just kind of
cool.
Oh my God. Yeah, I started early with that, and Chris and Dan give me free reign. They don't let me. You've edited me once, Chris, I think, because I did something that was semi-pornographic. And I looking back,
too far.
Just the semi part.
It was semi. It wasn't because there wasn't a whole person, so I'd say semi-pornographic.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's what, and it was a great project, and Dad did a great job directing, and it was a lot of fun. So I'll pass that along. Dan.
And I'm Daniel Thron. I'm a director and a writer, and I worked in visual effects for a long time as a environments artist, matte painter, storyboardist, that kind of stuff. Eric said it. Worked together with these guys for a long time, just doing VFX, digital domain stuff, and stuff like that. Where I also had the pleasure of working with Jackie, and we've over the course of working on VFX together, because everyone knows that's a very in the trenches kind of experience. You have to do things and talk about stuff to cheer yourself up when you're there late at night. And we ended up talking a lot about movies in depth, and that's why we ended up doing Martini Giant, because we were doing it so much that we figured we might as well record it. This project has been terrific. These guys are amazing, and I'm excited to talk about the impact we hope it has on the industry.
Amazing. Well, thanks for taking a few minutes to introduce yourselves. You definitely did do a much better job than I was about to, and we're all kind of come from the same kind of place. We're all from visual effects, and we're all trying to push the edge of visual effects. And we're all artists, and we're all fortunately care about the thing that these technologies exist for, which is storytelling after all. And many people kind of get carried away with the tech. But one of the things I love about the project, the Ray Tracing for the Win project specifically, that you created is that it focuses on that first. And whilst you're creating and highlighting a new technology that's advancing virtual production, you started, at least from my perspective, with story and fun and all the things that it should be. So yeah, it's really cool. And firstly, just congratulations again on the project. I had the privilege of being at the premiere and being able to at least hang out with you guys and a little bit and celebrate that moment, because it is a distinct moment. For anyone who doesn't know, Ray Tracing for the Win, as Chris kind of mentioned, is building on top of some pioneering work that Chaos Group have done. I've personally used V-Ray for probably the bulk of, at least post-Mental Ray days, for the bulk of my visual effects career, and it's fantastic, beautiful renderer, and now has, through Vantage, opened up the possibility of doing real-time ray tracing, which is the holy grail and is quite hard to do, and has kind of arrived, and pushing through Project Arena, which contains that technology and allows us to now be able to do that on an LED wall, or do it in virtual production, if you like. So unlocking the capabilities of doing what we used to have to wait many hours or days for in the past to see, now being able to see things in real time, which is unlocked a lot of fun for me personally as well, in working with computer graphics, which are traditionally tedious, and birthed things like Martini Giant for that reason. It sounds like. So yeah, it's a pleasure to have you guys here. I'd love for one or all of you at the same time to just say what was the moment, or what was the kind of genesis of this project, and that can be both technically and creatively.
Well, I can start with why we did it, and then we can talk. I mean, I can let these guys tell you how we came up with the story, but there's several parts to this. I mean, the big thing is this is actually a sequel. Some people don't realize that this is a sequel to a story, and the first story came out about 12 years ago. We were actually asked to do, or I was asked to do a video to celebrate V-Ray's 10th anniversary, and I don't like those videos where they have the people that are power users of the software just sitting in a conference room and talking about how they were inspired by the software and they thanked the users. And so we decided, instead of doing that, that Daniel actually came up with the idea that we would rob a bank instead. And it was a crazy idea. And it turned into a video called V-Ray IRL. And essentially the point of it was all these nerdy little CG guys trying to act like badasses in robbing a bank is completely out of character. So I constantly break the fourth wall and try to talk about CG, just like we're doing now. But while that's happening behind me, there's were robbing a bank. And it was very funny, right? And it's a kind of a wild idea. And I don't know how just thinking about it, just completely, but we pulled it off, right? We did it, and we did it in like very little time. Erick was involved in that project too. He was sort of ADing that project, but we just sort of did it in like a couple months. And it went viral, and people was like, "This is hilarious! These guys are doing these silly videos." And the point of the video is I'm constantly talking about how great V-Ray is, while there is absolutely no CG in anything that we're doing. We're just basically pointing out the things in the real world and say, "Look how the light is reflecting on this, and it's just the real world. It's not." Actually, CG.
Translucency. Look at this. So, it's all real stuff. Yeah.
So that was sort of the premise, and everyone's saying, and so we've been thinking for, like I said, it was 12 years ago. I was like, oh, you got to make a sequel. You got to make a sequel. You got to make a sequel. And I've always thought about it, but I've never nearly seen the opportunity to do it. So what happened more recently is, Chaos is now a much bigger company, and it's actually some people don't realize it, but Chaos has actually been sort of merged with another company called Enscape, and that sort of happened a couple of years ago. The reason that's important is that Vlado, who was founder of Chaos, sort of during the merger and this whole acquisition thing, he sort of as he sold essentially his shares of Chaos to the merger situation, part of the deal, he's like, I want to actually step down from being CTO. I don't want to be an administrator anymore. And I want to get back in the lab and start doing cool and innovative things, which is an awesome thing. So that's why he's actually the director of Chaos Innovation Lab. I am the director of special projects, which is different role. But his ambition was, I've been talking about real-time ray tracing and virtual production for like 10 years that I've been at Chaos. It's been a long time, and I knew that this is important. And he said, this is the right moment. Let's actually do something. We came up with Project Arena, which I can give you more details on how that works. But essentially, it's a big virtual production project that is very ambitious and also reinvents the entire pipeline of how specifically in-camera VFX has been done, right? Right now, there's a lot of things that are centered around game engines, and for us, this is more like direct to wall without having to go through an ambitious pipeline through the game engine process. So that was sort of the idea we were coming up with. And it was just, like any lab project is like, does it work? Hey, it works. And then it was like, let's see if we can do something with it. And Vlado said, well, I want to make a short, and we should do a short. And he wanted to do a sequel to V-Ray IRL. And he said, can we make a sequel? And he said, and I'm ambitious. Like, I know this project is not going to be small, and I'm totally cool with going full out. I want to know what an actual production, full-on production looks like all of it. And I said,
both in terms of being awesome and being a stress test.
Total stress test, and also just like everything. Like, let's throw everything at this. Throw everything at the wall, literally. Right? So, and he did. I said, "Are you sure? Because if we do this like a sequel, it's going to be really goofy and stupid, because that's the whole point, right?" And he's like, "Yep." So I went to Dan and Eric. I was like, "All right, we've been given the freedom to do this."
Right.
And it's like one of those things where you keep trying to like pushing the envelope. It's like, is there any pushback? And we didn't get any pushback on this at all. Not only for ambition of what we wanted to try to pull off, but also like the story and how crazy the story is. So anyway, how did you guys come up with the story? Like, what was our ideas here?
Just quickly before you do that, because you mentioned in that you've been wanting to do it for 10 years, like real-time ray tracing. What was the kind of crystallization of like that? Because 10 years is a long time.
Yes.
And you're obviously working on it for 10 years. But what was the moment you like kind of cracked it?
So before you saw even in-camera VFX, right, in virtual production stuff in general, I'd always, I knew that ray tracing is sort of a like, to me, that's the holy grail of rendering, right? Like, if it's specifically fully ray traced, not just ray traced reflections or ray trace shadows or whatever, but just fully ray traced. I knew that that's basically where we needed to go. So the first genesis of this came from when I was working on a project called Construct. This was directed by someone named Kevin Margot, who's now at NVIDIA, but at the time he was at Blur, and he was a director and visual effects supervisor at Blur.
Terrific director, and Construct is amazing.
Yeah, and he created something called Construct. And in Construct, he wanted to sort of look at what was possible. And at that time, we were looking at, this is back in 2013 or something like that, 13, 14. He was looking at how could ray tracing, we were looking at how GPUs could be used for rendering. And this is when GPU rendering was still kind of a little bit new at that time, or GPU ray tracing was kind of new. But we realized that if we put enough of these GPUs together, we could actually start to see a very noisy real-time rendering. And we actually integrated V-Ray inside of Motion Builder, which was like unheard of at the time. And we were actually motion capturing and ray tracing at the same time. And Kevin and I were looking at each other and was like, okay, this is the end of these rasterized OpenGL crappy gray looking images. From now on, if I'm looking through a virtual camera, I'm going to want to make it look as close to the final image as possible. And this was the beginning. And for us, we thought that like ray tracing as a virtual camera is going to be the correct proxy for the reality of what's out there. And so that's when we started to really look at it. So what happened over the last 10 years is that technology continued to grow. GPUs started to get faster. GPUs started to integrate new cores called RT cores, which are very important. That enabled us to develop something called Vantage, which is a completely new renderer based on V-Ray, but it is fully ray traced in real time using these RT cores and highly optimized for that hardware, which allows it to be in real time. And then more specifically, the thing that really sort of like ticked off Vantage in terms of Project Arena, in terms of beginning, what we did is we integrated DLSS 3.5, which includes ray reconstruction, which is a very, very specialized AI denoiser for ray tracing, which gives us extraordinarily clean renders at high resolution for real time. And that's the genesis. That was when Vlado and I went, okay, we're ready. This is it. This is the thing. This is the moment, and this is the right time to sort of flip the switch on it. So
very cool. Yeah.
Hopefully sorry, that was the most techie of all of our descriptions.
This is a techie show. That's the idea.
Yeah. Nerds listen to this. It's okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that was really cool to hear about having been a part of virtual production using Motion Builder in the pipeline and trying to get it to be better and look better. Yeah. So really cool to hear about that part of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear from Daniel and Eric as well about the genesis story-wise as well.
Eric, go for it.
Dan, it's you.
All right.
You start us off.
All right. Let's see. I think that this is this is a real Martini Giant answer, but it's like when we say we love movies, like we do like 3-hour podcasts on a single movie, like podcasts that are longer than the movie itself. And so like we think on this stuff very heavily. There are phases of especially American movie history that we really love, and phases of like Hollywood history that are fascinating for us. And so when we were talking about like what like V-Ray is trying to do, Advantage is trying to do here, and how this is important to the industry, it gets folded up in when we talk about the sort of the crisis that filmmaking is in right now, and not like VFX filmmaking, everything, movie theaters, like we're in a real. It's a struggly time.
Strikes.
Yeah, it's a struggling time for a lot of people.
Revolution of technology disrupting everything.
Right. And this is
biggest
not
one we've ever
but
seen.
the fear of AI.
Fear of AI too,
right.
yeah.
That's the
and
thing.
so like it's a lot of things are coming down at the same time, and it's also true for audiences, because audiences are sick of bad movies, bad expensive movies.
The same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And this is not like this is not the first time that we've been through this. You know, like I think you're right. It's like it's the biggest we've ever been through because it's happening on all fronts. But there's a time, especially in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, where this same thing was happening, at least on the sort of like the audience's losing interest front, right? And studios are having a really, really tough time because like the stuff that they had been cranking out for, you know, some musicals and, you know, good guy white hat westerns and like this, like westerns of the old type dominated.
It's all that we're showing.
It's all they were showing. It's just like TV is like there's like 10 westerns on TV.
Then emerged bad guy red hat westerns.
Red hat, it's very strange.
Threw the whole industry off.
But like all this stuff, like it was absolutely saturated, and then people just got sick of it and stopped, you know. And so like
they stopped going to the movies. They were just
stopped going to the movies.
But like, the theaters really thought that the studios really thought they were going to make Doris Day musicals
forever.
Forever.
Let's just repeat this ad infinitum, and we're just going to keep on gathering in money. But then a movie called like whatever, like, you know, Pillow Talk comes out and completely crashes, and they're like, what happened? The audience is gone. Yeah. And then
Ant-Man.
Yeah, exactly. And a sequence of events happened technologically that put control into
indie
filmmakers' hands and creatives' hands that revolutionized everything. And because like it's like one of the big kickoffs is a movie called Easy Rider, which was you know, this is like Jack Nicholson and Fonda and, you know, all these classic guys now. Like these guys, like they got to go out and shoot with like 16 millimeter cameras and run around and all this kind of stuff. And the movie was this gigantic hit, not just as a counterculture hit, but a gigantic hit. That kicked off the studios investing in younger, newer filmmakers with something real to say, right? That's where you get Francis Ford Coppola and Steven Spielberg and all this stuff. Like everything gets massively refreshed. And this carries over even to the thing that everyone thought was dead, which was Westerns, gets reinvented by Sergio Leone, right? He's like, I'm sick of the white hat good guy stuff. We're going to have a new modern take on Westerns with anti-heroes galore and grimness and spectacular cinema, right? No more TV nonsense. And he makes things like A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, on and on and on. And so where we connected when we were putting the story together for this is like, we're in the same crisis that was solved back in the 60s. You know, like we were at that inflection point when things are turning around. The turnaround comes from technology in the 60s. That's what makes it available to create more daring, more interesting art.
Specifically, reducing the camera size.
Yeah,
right?
because reducing the cost, the camera size, and making things much more accessible to even non-savvy filmmakers.
Yeah.
So they can express really wild new ideas, which is what the audience was craving. They'd been seeing, like, just like we have been, like with, you know, a decade plus now of churning out the same toothpaste. You know, and these
still
franchise
making Star
films.
Wars stuff 50 years later. I mean,
Yeah,
it's got to stop.
like, and like that, it needs a refresher, but that refresher is very hard to come by when those things are gigantically expensive, and so they don't want to spend money on risk, and so they keep on repeating the same thing, which is the thing that's screwing them up in the first place and making them lose money. So you need a technological revolution to turn that around because it opens it up to artists. And so that's why we chose Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and all these things as reference points, because what's happening with Vantage and what V-Ray is doing is making stuff that was formerly impossible instantly accessible. Like, and it gives you so much more freedom that it gives you creative latitude to do crazier and more experimental things, which are instantly more interesting. And that gets expressed even just by Vlado. Like when Chris is saying, you know, like Vlado is just like, do it. Whatever you want to do it. Because he understands that that's what the audience wants. Like, that's why we're here, to tell stories. Like you're saying, Ed, it's just like, we're here to tell stories. We're not here to repeat stories.
Well,
we're
we do. We
new
repeat story. We reference a lot of movies.
Oh, but that's the thing. Is like, this is, to be very clear, like referencing, like when great films reference other films, when Tarantino does this stuff, it's using a reference to say, like, please look at this new thing we're doing with this old lens, which is literally something we did when we shot. Like, we were using old lenses.
We were using vintage lenses.
Vintage lenses, because we think there's new angles on this old material that produces new material that you've never seen before. And so by having that attitude, I'm super proud of the work that we did. I think these guys fucking, pardon me, I swear all the time. We blew it out of the park on this. I'm so proud of it, and it's because of not only what Vlado and Vire allowed us to do, but because this gave us, the technology gave us the freedom and the time to do it, which is unheard of.
I do want to piggyback a little bit on the tech side, because, and this would be we'll kick off to something for Eric, but I think the big thing for
don't
here
worry about me
is that there is, when you said that, like, this Vantage allows for more, opens up the door for a lot of people to do things. Virtual production has actually been very, very much closed off to people with a specific kind of technology and set of ideas, right? And it involved, like, you need to get a big stage, you need to get an entire virtual art department, you need to get all these specialists, you have to open up entire groups of people just to get something on a stage. And the idea of what we're doing with Project Arena is that it massively reduces the amount of work needed to get things on a stage. Right? Because the whole point is that you can be in any 3D application, be it Maya, Max, Houdini, whatever. And currently you do need to use V-Ray to do your shader assignments. But that's, I can talk about how that's going to change in the future. But then once you do that, you just export the scene and it goes up on the stage. There is very little stuff that needs to be done on top of that. So when Eric, was working on designing the scenes with the guys from the scope, it was just like, here's a giant, massive scene. Yeah. Boom, right on the stage. So Eric, tell them a little bit about how you designed the world and how, like, you made this, because it was a big thing. It was huge.
Before you do, if I can just underscore what Chris says, then I promise, Eric.
Yes. It's okay.
The entire genesis of CG Pro actually comes from the same thing that you just said as well, though. Having worked on The Lion King and Jungle Book, and really seeing that how only large studios could do virtual production, MPC tried to productize the virtual production tools that we made in Unity and created Project Genesis, and it really was the intent to get it out there, but it was, you could only do it if you hired MPC, and you needed so much resource to be able to do that. And the reason we exist is because of wanting to do exactly the same thing. So it resonates with me a lot that you say that you want to give it to the average person and let more storytellers do that, because that's why we're here too, for sure.
For sure.
Eric, please do.
Yeah, but
continue.
Just to touch on what Dan was saying, I think one of the things about that 60s and 70s was also rock music and doing and saying things that you wanted to do in your way. It's interesting because people like Scorsese, who directed, The Last Waltz, and always uses rock and roll as a centerpiece for his films in some way. It's that
Mean
idea
Streets,
of
man.
doing
Mean
it
Streets
myself.
Yeah.
And that's really that generation listening to rock and roll music, particularly like the Stones and the Beatles, but the Stones and a lot of the Detroit bands, it really influenced people to go out and do their own thing. And that's not the story I want to tell. This is what I want to do. And that's kind of how I've always been. I'm not a Marvel fan in any way. I like creating more organically, and what's your thoughts and ideas, and all the way back because I'm older. So that's a real thing that this allows too, is that it's much more accessible. Like you were saying, The Lion King is this mega production. It's like, how about we just want to tell a cool story, and we now have the tools where we can gonna do it. And if we're smart about it, we can get on a stage and shoot, 3/4 of it there. So that's the really great thing, because it literally was, I designed all the work I started with research, went to Mid-Journey and Stable Diffusion to get looks, and then I built it in 3D Studio Max. And that Max file, and I textured it in Painter and Designer, Substance Designer, and that Max file and the assets pretty much was used on set.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we didn't convert anything.
It was just nuts. It just literally went straight through.
Yep. We work closely. Eric worked closely with a company out of Germany called The Scope. Specifically, I want to give a shout out to Matthias, who was awesome.
Yep, terrific.
They built, we gave them here's the layout. Eric designed where the town is and what direction, and we really, really planned this. By the way, I want to make sure people know, we planned this like a heist, as Richard Crudo, our DP, said. Yes. Yeah, so we knew exactly what we were doing when we were on set, so we had it all planned out. But we laid out the whole town and the whole scenario of the journey that it was going to be. Through that
Chris
process.
Imagined he was the mayor of the town, so he would walk around this outfit and a mustache.
Well, we did the Michael Mann way. We actually
it was
built
total
a Western
method. I'm like, Chris, are you okay?
It was fantastic, yeah. And I really learned to shoot. It's pretty great.
But they did. But the guys at the Scope, we like Eric said, a lot of stuff was built in Max, but then a lot of stuff was built in Maya and Houdini as well, and it all just kind of we all hodgepodged it together, created in one big VR scene file that was all sort of working.
And one file was 10 years old.
Yeah, so good. Yeah. Just throw this stuff in there.
Oh, yeah, yes, the Hacienda.
Yeah,
I'll tell you about the Hacienda in a second.
Running out of time and money, and maybe Chris's patience was running thin, so we just grabbed a 10-year-old file and bought it. Literally,
yeah, it was an old Evermotion file that we just bought the Evermotion file
threw it
threw it on the wall in 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was
didn't even convert anything. Just does this work?
Wow.
Done.
There's all of us who've been in over 25 years in the business to be able to just be it's really old. Put it up and it works. It's it's a totally different world now.
Yeah. Yeah, no conversion, anything else. But that major scene with the whole train sequence, et cetera. I mean, that thing was huge. It was 5 kilometers long. It was 2 trillion polygons, right? And when I mean we didn't optimize it, that's not an inefficient thing to do. It's actually a smart thing to do, because that means we could throw it in anywhere and we'll be fine. We don't have to worry about where it is. So it actually is way more efficient to be able to just throw it up there if you don't have to worry about performance.
Absolutely.
To add on to it, is just these guys, Eric and Chris, are these guys are tech savvy people.
Chris is tech savvy.
Chris is super duper
maybe savvy.
Yeah, you guys know what you're talking about when it comes to technology. I don't. I frankly don't. Right. And I am I'm the dumbass in this situation when it comes to computers. I've worked on computers forever, and I've managed to learn nothing for 25 straight years. And I am a 2D guy. I'm a 2D matte painter, all this stuff. And I'm good at that stuff. But when it comes to any of V-Ray, Vantage, etc., the wall, all this, this is something that I've never worked with in any direct way at all. Right. And so part of the stress test is that I don't know what I'm doing. Right. I'm the guy who just hey, I'm here to direct the movie, and have no clue how any of this stuff works. And I'm highly dependent on key people telling me if it's going to work or how it's going to work or whatever. Right. We have our AD, Ben Hansford, who's amazing, told me he's shot tons and tons of virtual production, and as we were playing the shots out, he was listen, I gotta tell you,
this is the first time Project Arena was ever used, so the only other experience anyone had was probably an Unreal pipeline.
Exactly.
Right?
So Ben tells me he's you got a ton of shots here on your shot list, a ton. We're set to do 30 setups a day, and he's
all of it was shot in we had 3 days
three
of
days.
shooting
In 3 days.
all of that.
Right. And with no OT. Like we had to get it out at 5. Like that was it. Right. That's what we had to do. And so I boarded it like crazy, built the shot list, and I ran it by Ben. And Ben's like, okay, so here's what's going to happen is you're going to cut most of these shots because the wall is going to crash and you're going to lose about 4 hours a day. Like, because this has happened to him every single time that because he's a director in his own right. He's directed like big time Super Bowl commercials, everything. And he's like, don't fool yourself. This is going to be a disaster if you're not prepared for your fallback position. Right. And so I had fallback positions, like designed everything, like, how do we shoot this way? How do we shoot this way? And then we get to the stage, we get it running. And for 3 straight days, no crashes, nothing. Got every single shot, but one shot, which was, we had to can for a different reason, nothing to do with the wall. And so we got every single shot that was in the boards plus 5 extra shots. It was unbelievable. And now this is not coming from a director who is just like, well, I work with this all the time. That's why I had no experience in this. And with a small, incredible crew working with Vantage, it was up, running, changeable at the drop of a hat. If there's like an issue in positioning, we could change it without rebaking. Everything smooth. And that time that we saved bought my shots back.
So all the wish list stuff came through.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole thing. The other thing that I think was important is that we were really looking at this as we're not highlighting the visual, the wall. We were focusing on the story.
Yep.
And we were focusing on just making this thing look like what Erick had done. So if you look at Erick's concepts that he created, they were perfect. I mean, they were great. They
lavish,
very lavish,
just incredible art, incredible.
Such a spaghetti western enhanced, like beautiful. The color palettes, the shininess, everything was just glistening. And we looked at it as like that's what I wanted to look like, and we gave this to Richard Kuda, who we really should honor, because he
incredible.
Really
legend.
It's while the technology is great and what it can do, if it's not lit correctly and it's not shot correctly, it's never going to look good, right? And he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And Richard had this big bone to pick about people that use either green screen or virtual production is they don't expose it correctly. Right? And that's not necessarily anything to do with the renderer or the wall. It just has to do with the DP not correctly exposing it. And the biggest thing that he did was he wasn't afraid to make the wall bright and,
it's sunshine
because it's the background and it's outside and it's supposed to be bright. And that I think was the thing. Then, don't necessarily try to highlight the background. The background is the background. Make it look correctly exposed. And I think that is a big key factor to why this looks good is because
Richard, absolutely.
Richard,
So instead of having it kind of squashed so you can see everything and it's more like an HDR photo, it's like make it look like it would if you shot
it. Looks CG when you do that.
Because I see that you see this all the time in full-blown, very expensive movies. You'll see like actor soft lit from 3/4, right? And he has a little highlight on one side to give him a rim, right? And then the sky is also blue, right? And everything is in sort of a medium range. And I'm like, what planet is this on? With a dying star? What this like? I don't understand what I'm looking at. This doesn't look real at all. Yeah, exactly. Well, this is like so many crescendo superhero fights take place on cloudy days. Because they're shooting in a green screen and they don't know what the fight's going to be. So they have to lit it soft in general. And then they're like, well, the only thing that looks vaguely real is if it's at an airport and it's raining. And that's it.
But those are great places to shoot. Let's just do that.
It's so designed to be boring. It's insane.
Yeah. And if you look at those Sergio Leone films, like there's bright ass sun outside, right?
It's like really high contrast being made, man. That's it. Yeah.
So when we previs this thing, we work with Daniel and Erick, and we were looking through this whole thing. It's like we knew where the sun was supposed to be for every shot, right? And we rehearsed it with Richard. Richard, by the way, I should note, Richard is an extremely experienced.
How many? He was head of the ASC. How many times?
6 times he was head of the ASC for six terms.
He's a big
Super talented.
Yeah.
Super talented, and he trained under Gordon Willis. And I don't know if people know who Gordon Willis is, but
The Godfather, Clute.
He was the DP on The Godfather and Clute and a bunch of other amazing films.
Which is
Broadway Danny Rose.
Broadway
Danny Rose. Yeah, like
right.
That's incredible.
And so he really sort of has a love of cameras, and he's like, by the way, the most perfect fit for geeking out about movies with the three of us. But he looked at this thing and he was like, okay, I know how I want to shoot this thing. And he knew he wanted to shoot it with an RA35, right? Or Alexa 35, because that was the closest thing to look like film that he wanted, to get the right exposure for film that he wanted. And then we worked, because of his relationship with the AC, et cetera, we worked with Panavision. He got the P vintage lenses, which are technically the old glass from the 70s, right? That were rehoused into modern housing to work with these modern cameras. And the glass of these films could have been used on The Godfather. Who knows what they were used on, right?
Yep.
That's the other thing about Panavision. Most people don't realize that Panavision, you can't actually buy a Panavision lens. Every Panavision lens kit is rented. So every time you rent it, it has a history of what movies were made with it.
Double check that, but I think the exception is Spielberg.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Spielberg might own some Panavision lenses.
I think he got his own set after. It could be Lure, but after Close Encounters.
Yeah, he gets to keep them.
It's interesting. But normally you can't do it. But anyway, these are old lenses, right? And you can tell when you look at it that they have that 70s look to them, right? And
there's a shot that you talk about, right? That you can only get in virtual production with these lenses.
There is a shot with specifically when I come and if you guys look at it, and we shot it 4K, so you can pause on a 4K frame. But there's a shot where I'm coming through the bank, right at the very beginning, and it's a close-up shot of me, so there's a lot of depth of field, but the background is all virtual production, right? It's all the wall, but the defocus is like a true optical, vintage lens defocus, right? There's strange fringing and aberration that happens around the edges of the hat that are
circular
you can only get from that lens. And so the background mimics the same effect. If we shot it on a green screen, there's no way you would have gotten that quality.
Because the green screen is just a green wall. It's not going to produce a circle of confusion for anything.
Yeah, but not just that, but it's also like the hat, the way that the hat blends into the background.
The way it blurs into the background. All this is from the light that is coming at the camera. Like the light hitting the edge of the hat splits in such a way that only happens when you're actually using light. And if you filmed that and then tried to green screen it, it's gone. It doesn't exist. The light doesn't exist to do it with.
So everything and all the lens flares, by the way, were all in camera too.
Yeah.
So
does it have in the background itself is Project Arena also blurring the background at all, or is it all the defocus happening in?
We did not do that, and it was a strategic decision to not defocus it that way, because we shot it in a way that made more sense to do that. To build in defocus into the background would have been there's only a couple reasons why you would want to do that, and you have to sort of
intensely complicated mathematical trick.
And you have to sort of make it work with the foreground and the background together, and it's just it would be too complicated. So for us, we just did it all in camera. So all the defocus was done in camera, and that worked well, actually. So I didn't.
Yeah, because the realistic, just to talk about like filmmaking versus pipeline for a second is like we we worked. There was 2 divisions at Digital Domain: the commercial division and the features division, right? And I had started in the commercial division, and David Fincher had come to work on Zodiac at DD, and he wanted to work with the commercial division because of the mindset of how to do shots was more in line with how Fincher worked, which is to say that it is not a pipeline mindset. Like when you're building out an elaborate pipeline, you're trying to handle every contingency for essentially for producers to change things in the end of the process. Like, so you can repo cameras and you can rebuild scenes and you can change where things were shot and all this kind of stuff. Whereas Fincher knew what he wanted to make, like, and he shot it the way he wanted it to look, right? And so he knows what the effects are. He has it already built because he already did it in pre-production. And so every shot is its own magic trick, right? And that is the way to make movies. Like, you're trying to solve the shot, right? Richard thinks like this, we think like this. And like what working with this allowed us to do was to go, we're looking through it. We know what it's supposed to look like on the set, or looking at the shot. What can we do to push this push it over the edge and make this look real? And we do that for every single shot because we've already planned the shot. And that's something that you do not get out of working with an enormous amount of green screen, because doing everything green screen means that your executive producers will push as many creative decisions towards the back end as they possibly can. But when you are shooting virtual production, you have to make those creative decisions up front, and everybody's a part of it, and everybody knows what they're making. And those creative decisions are artistic and are trying to make a great film now. They're not trying to make a smooth product in the end.
Right.
And
they're based on feedback, right? You're based on things that you're experiencing, testing, seeing, making adjustments.
You're right
to.
there making the movie. You're telling the story in the moment on the stage, and you're looking at it and saying, does that look the way we want it to look? And Richard's looking through the lens and goes, yep, that's it, right? That's what makes it great. And like when you set that up as your process, it is automatic that those, like, the sense of creativity is baked into what you're doing, because you're not absolving yourself of making those decisions. You're taking control.
Tell me a little bit. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
There's something that Richard sort of like, and it always resonates with me, and I think it's become so important to really think about how filmmaking is being done today and how we need to improve it, or I hate to say it, but go back to storytelling, which is the whole point of what we were saying. When Richard started in this industry, he mentioned that he worked on film. And when you work with film, you basically have to you just don't shoot everything, right? You have to be, cautious about your film. You're trying to conserve your film, what you want. So he equates it to like, you planned everything before you shot it, so you'd make sure you get what you needed correctly. And he said it was kind of like planning a heist. You planned every little step of it. And goes, today, because people shoot digitally and they don't care, they just shoot everything and hope to solve it in post, right? So he says now it's like a smash and grab, right? You just shoot everything. And when you think about what that means for actually shooting for the director and the actors and everything, no one knows if the take they're doing at that exact moment is going to matter or even be in the film. So they just say it like the line over and over. There's no commitment to what they're shooting, right? Because there's no commitment until later in post. So the poor editor has to figure out how the hell to turn this into something that's usable, as opposed to doing it correctly. And so when you do it and you say, this is the take, this is the shot, I know this is going to be in a film, people commit to it. All of them, the director, the actor, the DP, they all know exactly what it's going to look like, right? And they know that this is going to be in the movie.
Well, because this is the thing, because I think like actors get a sort of like when this green screen stuff gets talked about, actors get kind of a short shrift. They're just like, oh, well, actors, like they're on a green screen and they don't know what's going on. Like, that's not exactly true, right? Like, because an actor on the stage, on a theater stage, like, you can do a black box version of Hamlet where everyone's wearing T-shirts and there's nothing physically believable about your environment that says that you're in, a castle, right? But they still act because they know the context of what they're doing. They know the emotions and where they're supposed to be at, and they understand what they're trying to, the magic trick they're trying to pull off for you.
I think this, but to get the continuity of action when you have a green screen is hard.
Right. This is what I'm saying. Is that when you are shooting on green screen, it isn't that actors can't imagine being in a castle. They can totally do that. Like, if they know what they're there to do, they can act because they're actors, they're professionals, right? Green screen doesn't matter. Where it does matter is if nobody's made any creative decisions about whether you're in a castle or on a baseball field or in an apartment, but we're going to shoot you anyway, Robert Downey Jr. Like, he doesn't know what to do. Like, what am I angry? What is that? What am I doing? What am I playing? But all that is pushed to the end where we're like, don't worry, we're going to cut you out. We're going to put you in a castle or maybe an airport. I don't know. Like, that's why it stinks. You know, it's not his fault. The actors are professionals, but when you don't make the movie, when you make the
and
movie,
honestly, I think that's why directors in Hollywood hated CG for so long, because basically it just ruined the filmmaking
They didn't have
process.
control.
It disconnected it.
They didn't feel like they had control at all, because it was they put it in the hands of somebody else. Besides, they also put so much else into somebody else, like the studio controls. So it's
that's what really opened my eyes to it. Going through the Jungle Book, Lion King process, which spat me out of the DD commercials department and across the road, and on this experiment of a way of making movies, and seeing especially the time on stage, which was more so on Lion King, seeing the director and the DP and the production designer and the animation supervisor and everyone being in that space, everyone being able to essentially play. I remember, I'll never forget the first moment when they brought Pride Rock out onto the set. The entire room of a few hundred people, including all of the staff, were all looking at it because no one had seen people do this before. They're like, what are they going to do? They've got these toys now, and they played. They were playing. They were figuring it out. That's really what opened my eyes to the difference that this stuff is making. Is put exactly what you guys are saying, and the intention of wanting to get it out there for more people to be able to do this and experience it.
When we are shooting this thing, and we're shooting the bank scene, and like we're looking through the lens, and I'm seeing Erick's bank, like as he designed it, like months ago, and it looks identical to the concept art, and it's phenomenal. And like I'm looking through, I'm just like, it looks real, and then you pull back, and you're like, this is not real, and you go up to the lens, and you're like, this is real. Like, that's inspiring to you. And like, that's when I say it, like, it buys you time, like, because it buys us time, like, if we plan, we know what we're shooting, then it may buy us in the middle of production a little extra time to do a little extra something else. So even when you're shooting, you get to be creative. You get everything that you dreamed of, and then a little bit extra.
It is a little bit of that. What you see is what you get, and it's like it takes the tension off. It's like, because you're sitting there directing somebody. It's like, gee, with that bar in the background, that sign, the line, I'll deal with it later. There, it's like, okay, let's go. And you're capturing a little more working with the actors, which you were, and less like, because there'll be a building there, and then that thing. There's none of that. It's just like, let's just shoot, and I'll interact with the actors and act. If it was green screen, you probably wouldn't have acted. Dan, because you were directing and acting.
I couldn't do it. There's no way. There's no way. I mean, any one of us.
I think, I've been a lighter for a long time in visual effects, right? And I tell you what, I'd much rather have Richard light it correctly than me trying to guess what Richard wanted to do, right? And so having the actual DP be an actual CG lighter, and he did, right? He was so excited. He went back to the control room and talked to Vlado. First of all, having Vlado as your
exactly.
He goes, can you move this here? I want the sun over there. Can you just make the sun over there? And he goes, yep. And so by the time I got back to the camera, it was already all set up. The sun had moved. It was perfect. He was so excited. It was great.
But that ability to make those changes where you want to do it out in the real world, and you're like, we can't move the sun there. We just like catch it in this little minute here, and then
12 hours of magic hour.
But like all this like comes at like you come at it from the audience perspective, right? Like what's really wild now, and was a great opportunity now, is that audiences don't care about your stupid visual effects. They don't.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. They care about story. They care about the movie being good. Like that. If these giant franchises want to know why they're having such a struggle, it's because your movies are bad. That's it. Like, solve that issue, you'll be in better shape.
Story is so cheap. Why don't you just make a good story instead of spending $100 million on just trying to solve this technology problem?
For years, for decades and decades, like we all grew up like this. It's just like visual effects themselves were worth paying for, because it was such an incredible novelty to see these beautiful images, and they're like, oh my God, what Lucasfilm can, like, whatever, they can do this amazing stuff, and that we'd totally gloss over whether or not the movie was watchable. We'd just be like, look at the shiny new thing they can do. But now we have so much media coursing through our veins all the time. There is nothing special about special effects at all.
When did you realize
assumed.
That? What movie?
Gosh, that's a great question.
Thanks for coming back. With me is Dan Thron, Ed Dawson Taylor, and Chris Nichols.
It's a great thing, because like there are movies like when they made the first new Star Wars movies, the new trilogy, like, where now I think these movies are okay. I think they're pretty good movies. A lot of people slam on these movies, and the visual effects are outlandishly good in those movies, but they do not, for me, get free nostalgic value over how wonderful the effect is.
Right.
Like, and so you look at this, the Millennium Falcon dives and does the thing, and you're like, yeah, cool. Yeah, I did that in the Star Wars video game also. You know, like,
I want to ask about just for a second, talking about that, and actually going a little bit back to the process of creating the world, and maybe some more for Erick as well on this, because the process of building it and going through the concept phase, designing this thing, I want to hear a little bit more about how you kind of went from that, how you started to explore it. Did you do kind of scouting early on? Did you, like, how did you all look at, to Erick particularly, how did you come to the point where you were looking at this in 3D, moving past the kind of reference and concept phase?
Well, it was, going to 3D was just part of the schedule, but actually prior to that, we blocked it out. So I built a lot of like Doughboy gray shaded stuff, but I started with images, Library of Congress, movies, researching the different...
Erick is an amazing researcher. Like, he can find references.
It's called rabbit holes for about 4 hours. You're like, oh my God.
Insane. Beautiful.
So he'll look at all these Westerns and like just create this massive library of reference, which is
and then
really
I'll make
cool.
these little books with graphics and cool art that I do, and put them in and send it to him. So we have a ton of those. We should share some.
Yeah, he'll make 1,000 images in a day. I mean, like generative AI has been
plus
like
other concept stuff like paint.
Huge benefit to him to be able to get his ideas out, because Erick is just a mindful of ideas, and he just
Chris, you just sent out that you found the first pitch book of like the art book that Erick put together, and like just flipping through it, I'm like, that's the movie we made.
We just made exactly that, which was hilarious.
Other ones, just like on the props, like I did one for light fixtures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Right? Because I found a database of old Pullman trains and their blueprints, and I would take those and kind of work. But originally, and it was helpful because originally we built, it was going to be a huge set, and then I kind of came up with this curtain thing, like one end plus a curtain, because it was a split rooms in those days. But the original length was like 46 feet, and you can't do that. So we shortened it, but you
make the books like real printed out books.
No, I just made it. I do a lot of. I'm working on. In the morning I work on a graphic novel that I'm making, but I like the printed concept and painting.
Yeah, sticking them on the wall.
Yeah, I started out as a painter, and then I went to grad school at NYU for set design. And by the time in the 90s, and by the time I got out to LA, I wanted to just do computer work. And so I started doing that, just 3D stuff and 2D, but it was fun.
I can't tell you how, I think people need to realize, like, when Erick's so prolific creatively, it's actually hard to imagine.
It's overwhelming. Right? It's overwhelming.
It's a little too much. Like, you have to, I kind of jokingly say.
You got to be prepared for it.
You got to be, it's kind of like Cyclops. Like, it's just like this. You just got to put the lens on, and then suddenly it's very concentrated. But he says, "Oh, I'll make something, for this," and then suddenly, like a day later, here's like a 50-page book.
Yeah,
fully,
it's astonishing,
fully realized.
And like, there's moments where like I was rewatching a movie called Dillinger, right, with Warren Oates from the '70s, great film. and like it has it opens in a bank robbery, and I was just like, oh my god, it's like this is like Eric Eric has designed such an accurate period bank.
They designed off a bank in Wyoming. And I got the original photos of the bank from Wyoming.
Oh my god! Yeah, it was.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So it's his inspiration was all from real westerns and real things,
the
and
design
he just
was
created.
entirely like the look is entirely Eric's, and the accuracy was so ridiculous. I was like, this is like, now we said before, but like Eric, from our point of view, like Eric is this world building machine. Right.
Yeah.
And so he creates these, not just like, here's
There's no money
for
in
this,
that, by
like,
the way, but it's still very rewarding.
But like he creates such a massive amount of interconnected imagery that you start seeing this place as if it exists. And that starts at like the script stage. So when we're working on the script, we're referencing the images that he is generating and already writing the movie to exist in that world that he's creating. And that just continues on through the entire process.
That's how I write, because I'm a writer. That's how I write, is through images.
Visually, yes.
So I'll create worlds and characters, and then I write stories around them. That's the only way I can work, unfortunately. But
no, that's a good.
So what happened? What happens next then? Now you've got the big books full of reference imagery. You mentioned blocking, which some people might understand.
Sat with Richard and blocked. So I took in V-Ray. We did in Vantage, and then everybody zoomed in, and I had all the sets there, grayscale shaded.
Well, explain how you made a transition from the CG world to the physically built, because you actually gave all of the stuff that was in 3D and gave that to the set builders to make the actual stuff. So explain how you did that.
All I did was take my designs, and I just I use Max and Maya, and Blender, but I just in Max I found a script. That basically it just takes the edges and turns everything into splines. So I built the blueprints from what I did instead of bringing it in. So I took the splines from it because it was the right scale. And I used to be a draftsman. I just kind of rebuilt it. Didn't take long, surprisingly. And it makes it and flattens it out. And I took those and put my measurements in. So I built all the blueprints from that, and then I sent it to the builders, but with correct measurements, and then I made it modular so you can pop these pieces. But in 3D, you can do that. But then I built out the file, did the textures and so forth in Substance, and then worked with the builders. Tom was amazing, Tom Early.
Yep.
But it literally, I walked into that room that Chris was mentioning, and it was like, oh, that's that file I used. I mean, like 4 months ago. I was like, look at that. That's incredible. Hey, I know that scene. And they're like, yeah, you gave it to me.
It looked exactly like what we had, which was so cool, man.
And from a shooting perspective, like you cannot undersell how incredible it was to have that be modular the way that you designed it, because it would have been impossible for us to shoot without that.
Yeah, and a lot of builders I went to were like, there's no way. It's going to be one piece. I said, dude, you're going to have to like take a crane, lift the roof off, and then drop the set in, and then put the roof back on.
Yeah, so there's no way to.
We found one that did. And he's like, yeah, I get it. I was like, thank you.
Tom was great. And that's another thing. Like, we all sort of had to sort of be on the same page about what was going on. Everyone was that, just not just the CG people, but the practical people. So Tom was our set builder. And Tom, by the way, has experience in virtual production. He actually worked on the Mandalorian set, right?
Yeah, beautiful set work.
So
gifted.
So talented.
As a builder and an architect and designer. He was amazing. Amazing guy. Nice guy.
And so he made those things look exactly like when we put that set. I was like, oh my God. And when we were on that train, we all felt like we were on a train. Like we all were like, we're going on a ride.
Yeah. It was so convincing that the AD had to tell everyone, Ben Hansford had to tell everybody, like, if the landscape is moving on the screen, don't do anything that is unnecessary because you may fall over.
Like, don't get on a ladder.
Don't get on a ladder. Don't get, because you will confuse yourself.
Get motion sick or
especially when it's going around the turn.
Yeah, it gets really weird. Yeah, it was so convincing, and Eric went into such beautiful detail in the concept work Then, but as we've all seen movie sets, like when you see like the Star Trek set for real, you're like, this is kind of crappy.
It's like it's like old
I
egg
saw
cartons.
a piece yesterday. Actually, it was up at Unreal Fest, and there was the captain's chair in a glass case, and I was like, wow.
Yeah,
it looks terrible.
It's just like plywood.
Yeah, when I first moved to
LA,
LA from New York, I worked for a really great guy, John Iacovelli, and he was designer of Babylon 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked there, and it literally was egg cartons in the back.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
Exactly.
It was like those
we all
little
worked at
protruded
DD,
things
and
you put
when you
eggs
see
in.
the Titanic there, it was like...
Yeah, dude, it's all jank, And so like you see Erick's concept, and like and I think that anyone would say this in production, right? You're like, yes, the concept looks like this, but when you get to set, like they're obviously gonna
It'll look like that. Yeah,
it'll look like that. But in fact, when we get to set, you're just like, this is a train, and it looks like the concept, down to like the beveling on the bar and everything else. You're just like, how did this happen?
But that's kind of cool, though. It kind
it's
of
incredible.
And it really helped. I think, the other thing that was really important, and I think, Ed, you tested, and it's a testament to what the virtual production thing is. We really want to make sure that everything had a real feeling that you couldn't necessarily get with green screen, right?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of funky, weird schmutz on the glass, right, to make it look aged. And and we put the bar, right, and all of the bottles on the window, and so all the light shines through that. There's no way you could do that with green screen, right?
No.
And
They
if
would've
you
told you
look
to
through
take it
those
off.
shots, you can see reflections, you can see everything.
But that was your
sort of,
touch. You wanted the bottles up
Oh,
on
that's
the
beautiful.
side.
It's
yeah.
Chris, Chris
pushing
is
that.
like, it's just insane. I mean, because like the
I
thing
want to
is like,
see, and I don't want to necessarily see the background has to be there, but what all the light does through the glass.
Yes, and this is the key. And Chris brought this up before. Is like that's an example of like he's like, I want these things on there because I want this to like when you realize what is happening technologically, like you see the value of it. But like the attitude that Richard and everybody, all of us brought to it is like, do the complicated, amazing thing and then throw it away.
Yeah.
Like throw it away. Don't pay attention to it because that's not the story. Like film the movie as if this is actually going on, and then you're going to make a good movie. And then when you talk about making the movie, people will be like, "Wait, what? You did what?
What?"
Yeah.
Like that's what makes it work.
And
That's what
the
makes it work
thing,
so
when I
beautifully.
looked through the lens when we first shot this, I was like, oh, the background is so bright, and like you can kind of, you don't see any clouds out the window, which is totally fine because that's correct, right?
Yeah.
But
if you're in a dark
I gotta tell you,
car
everyone
and
who
looking
saw
out
the
a
film
bright
was like,
window.
which train did you use to do it? It's like, no, that was all on a stage. People didn't realize that it was
It's just crazy because like even when we do the big pullout in the end to reveal the gag, no one sees that like the train set in its modular form is actually over on the side,
Right.
And so like I think a lot of people see it and then go, oh, they did that last part like this, and that's part of the funny bit. I'm like, the whole thing was shot on that stage, like that like in that arc, everything is there visible. And
if three knuckleheads like us could shoot something that looks significantly more realistic on a train than, let's say, a movie called Bullet Train, where it does not look realistic outside the windows.
No insult to anybody. Like that is a result of that kind of production. That's a studio mindset production. That's not.
Yeah.
That is not the VFX people who work on
I
it.
always
Who work
wonder-
super hard.
here's the thing,
It's the production decisions that put you there. Go
I'm
ahead, sorry.
wondering, because it had such a really distinct color saturation, I wonder if they decided later, because it didn't have enough depth and looked cool enough, that they really amped up the color
stylized
saturation.
it a bit.
Do
Yeah,
you know what I
I
mean?
think that's
Stylized it
reasonable,
more
sure.
during edit, just to make it more.
Well, we
possible.
stylized a
Believable.
lot of what we did too in
but
what we did.
those
Like,
colors
Oh, yeah.
in Bullet Train are like super saturated.
Yeah, very punchy, hyper punchy. Yeah,
I've
but I mean
seen
that's
so
the
much,
kind of thing like
so much happen in the color suite where you're
Yeah.
like, no, don't keep going with the contrast wheel, please don't.
well, this is the great thing because we not only did we like Richard's there and we're all working on the color and refining it, but there wasn't actually that much work to do in the color suite because like we had locked it all in pre-pro. Like we went there and we did a bunch of testing. We said this is the kind of bandwidth we want to be working in. We locked that in as the LUT. We shot it that way. It looked like that on the set. It looked like that on the wall. We get the stuff back out in the movie and we go, hey, it looked like the thing that we were there to shoot. And it did. And we just had to tune things very slightly.
The nice thing, especially as a visual effects artist, when you're starting to put this single thing together and you realize you've got the entire bar sequence, which involves an entire CG background, and you have no visual effects to do. It's just done.
It's just there. There it
It
is.
just goes right into the can,
Yeah.
and you don't have to worry about it. It's done. It looks great.
And this doesn't mean that we're
not
against
thinking-
using green screen or anything like that. Like use the tool that you need to do the trick. Like green screen is incredible at certain things, but you don't want to. Nothing should be the global answer. There is no global answer to a shot, right?
Yeah, LED walls aren't the right technology.
like
for every
that's not
single
going to work
shot.
for everything, right? But it can work for a lot of things really well if you know what you're doing and it affords you the time to do it.
Right. I do want to say one more quick thing, which I've said it a couple of times, but I want to make sure we say it on this podcast. There are several all CG shots that were also in this, right? So establishing shots, shots at a train moving by and the train crash, etc. Those were the exact same assets that we used on set, right? So we didn't have a real-time version and a non-real-time version. We used the same asset for both. Which means that we could make them look exactly the same. And that's why they look the same on set as they did in all CG, because it wasn't, rebuilt for that purpose. It was just all done the same way.
But for people that are, because there is wall stuff that I've seen on various shows on TV where you go, oh, that doesn't work, right? It looks like a screen. It's whatever it is. Like that is the result, not of anyone being untalented on set, but it's just the result of when you put people in a production situation where they're thinking in terms of pipeline, not magic trick, like as we were saying, then you're not going to make the right decisions because there aren't global answers, right? But when you do use this technology in the way that it affords you to use it, you can make things look mind-blowingly real. And so the more time, this is what is the great thing about Vantage is like it just gave us time, and by having the time we can do it right.
Yeah,
I love how much art department you used as well, because to that point, a lot of the bad or less good virtual production work I've seen is where there's an actor in front of a screen, but that's it. There's nothing else, and they look very disconnected.
Right.
The background's really blurred out. They're not colored or lit properly, and they look extremely different. And you guys did a great job of doing those things to help integrate them.
That was Erick. He knew that he had to add just a little bit of mid-ground or just a little bit of
so
this
it's
and that.
flat. So we made really cheap columns and painted it just to match the 3D asset. And then we just placed them in little things to place depth, so it wasn't a fall off. It was like a nice gradual.
Yeah,
It
it's
worked.
perfect.
And
We
then
also-
you put people right by it, there was a fake column of cardboard painted to match the CG, and we plopped it there and then put James close to it, and it just
sold
worked.
instant.
It was cool.
Yeah, and there was a lot of sort of elements that were added as well, little prop elements like a door here or a trunk
Like
here,
a pencil with an eraser. Just a little, it makes the difference.
I really think that without doing it the way we did it, we never would have had some of the funniest stuff in there. Is the Niederhorst stuff, like the green screen man stuff, and it's like you can only do this when you have not only thought through the world so richly that you can sort of mess around in it, right? But when you're working with a crew and a tech that allows you to go screw it, let's just put more Niederhorst in. And if you want to make a good movie, I highly recommend putting more Rob Niederhorst in your movie. That's a value add across the board.
Yeah.
I love the train car scene because it seems like that's the point where all of the ideas about all of the different bits of technology that are all colliding, including the new AI Kevin Mack barman, having all of that. How did that scene come together? Was that all kind of pre-planned? Was there anything in there that kind of was a happy accident?
Almost everything was pre-planned.
Right.
Down to
Yeah.
I mean, we put together, largely Chris and Eric put together a short list of people that we wanted to try to get on board, and so it became the focus of how do we best use these folks, and so not only do we get to we use we have the production designer for Avatar is the bank teller, this kind of stuff. But like as you're saying with the train car, and Chris can speak more directly about this, like having this particular people at that table that we do itself is a story.
Yes,
you know, and like that becomes the focus of both the joke and the celebration of the event.
I mean, the thing that we were trying, like, the statement we're trying to make is that we're trying to make a statement about the industry in general, right? And and so while it is technically a tech demo, we're literally telling you in the script that we need to get back to making real movies. And everyone participating in that narrative are
Scott
all
Ross.
the people that are, do some of the biggest CG stuff in the world, right? So like at the poker table is Marcus Fajardo, who's the creator of Arnold, right? Sebastian Silwan, right? Who's a big guy in the industry. Rob Niederhorst, Barbara Ford Grant, all these, Phil Galler, right? It's Kevin Mack. All these guys are big guys in the industry, but they're all telling a story about like, we got to get back to telling stories again, right? We can't sort of get sucked in the rabbit hole of the distraction of technology. And that's happened quite a bit, like we've been like distracted by things like, oh, let's make NFTs. Like, how is this going to help the film industry? How is this going to make a better story? Right? Or let's do, I don't know, whatever, AI tool, and it doesn't matter. Like AI tools are great if you put them in the right hands. If I give them to Eric, I'm going to get some great stuff. Like I always joke is like, I can give my dad a Leica, but he's not going to take a good picture, right?
Exactly. It's a tool. These are tools. These are all tools.
And I can, I can give my stepdad Midjourney. He's not going to create some incredible piece of art out of it, right? It's you need to have the right vision. You need to have the right imagination. You need to have the right story. And Eric was looking through these images and getting stories, and that's, I think, the thing that we all looked at and inspired by. So just to give credit to the actual story, like the bulk story, while loosely based on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in terms of the plot line that was happening, is telling the story about Hollywood. But yes, Eric and I came up with all the goofy CG jokes as we were going.
It's really cool. I mean, you guys really effectively took what for most tech demos made everybody ignore the technology largely while they were watching it. At least I did, which was great, because being a visual effects artist is very easy to like focus in on those things and try and evaluate them whilst you're watching them. But it did make me forget about those. And I'm interested to your point of because the story is highlighting a new technology advance, but the film is highlighting a new technology advance, but the story is telling a story, which is very meta in itself. You're making a story about the fact there needs to be more story, and we're starting to see as a school, seeing people that come to the school. Recently we had one that was, I said, I want to make a feature film, and I thought, people don't do that. People don't make visual effects feature films by themselves. It was a sci-fi film, a full feature, and I said, well, make a teaser, and then we'll see. And then he kind of went away, and 2 years later he came back and he was on this podcast having done just that. He made a full sci-fi comedy, terrific, which is really good, and it got in the theaters. It had a theatrical run, and it's like, just seeing some of this stuff emerging, seeing independent film creators actually starting to do this,
it's awesome.
A bit more.
And this is for them. The screen and what we did is totally for them, because we're a small little group here and we did this.
Well, this is the answer to like many industry woes, right? It's like take a hold of like the creativity that this affords you, right? And you will win back what you love.
So what would you guys say? And Zach, huge props to Max and Molly in the Future, which I should give full credit for. That was a really, really cool film, worth watching. What would you guys say to people out there? Maybe a nod to the industry, or maybe just a nod to more to the indies, because maybe the industry can't do this itself. To help do this, to be the change, to have the courage to go do it? What would you say to people to encourage them?
I have a good. For me, I think you create without the gatekeepers in mind. Just create. And when you get the format out, or I have to present it to this and this, forget the gatekeepers. Just write that song you wanted to write, make that movie you wanted to make, like the gentleman you just talked about. I think the big shadow for me too, as an artist, was like, got to get it into here and go to this process in LA. No, just do it. Just make your thing. And the tools like what we're talking about just help you push it through. And I'm not saying screw the gatekeepers. I'm saying get that out of your head and just make for the love of making, like the same way, the Stones got together because they all love the blues, in Lex's Corner and all that stuff. So, and then they just started writing their own stuff because they started being pushed to do their own stuff. So there's a lot of cool things you can do.
They didn't write it because they wanted to be on the radio, right?
Right. Yeah, right, because they love making music. That's the idea.
Yeah.
They wanted.
And I think we say it in the short, but it's like the story is important, right? The story, and there's ways of telling stories. They don't have to be complicated, but it has to be a good story, and it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right?
Oh.
And I hate to, like, I just saw, I don't want to, we bash movies on our podcast all the time, so I'm okay to do it. I watched Deadpool versus Wolverine. There is no story in this thing. Everyone loved it. There's no story. All it is the references of other things that you've seen, and there's no story. It's just a giant meta reference of BS. Yeah, and in fact, I almost feel like Ryan Reynolds is looking at you saying, this movie sucks because there is no story, and everyone laughs at it. And they forgot. He's like the emperor has no clothes, and they all say, "Yay!" Like there is no story. And the same thing. I watched Beetlejuice recently, and there's no story. It's just a giant reference of the old movie.
It's like if you ordered a pizza and the pizza came and you opened up the box and it just had a card that said, "Remember how much you love pizza." You'd be like, what?
No. So tell a story, tell a good story. And then you can, that's the beginning of what you need to do. And then if you have a good story, then everyone's going to watch the story and forget about everything that's going on behind them. And I think that right now, going back to what we were originally talking about, technology allowing for new ideas, there is a big crash in Hollywood right now. It is a bad time, right? And everyone's suffering. I get it. But this is the moment when new things come up. This is the moment where new ideas, and this is going to be the moment when indie films are going to be interesting again, right? Yep. And we jokingly, or I at least jokingly say that, Everything Everywhere All at Once might be the Easy Rider of today, right? Mm-hmm. It might be the new film that goes like, wait, what was that? What? Yep. How was that? Yep. Right. And so those guys are out there and they're using a lot of weird technology, including a lot of AI tools. Right. Mm-hmm. And they created something very special at a very reasonable price.
Yep. That's right.
And so just because it's got a bunch of CG or even just because it has virtual production doesn't mean it needs to cost, a ton of money.
Yep. All this stuff is only going to get more accessible, more cheap.
Yeah.
And it's more in your hands to do it. And so like when we said that like the industry is collapsing, you look at it this way, like you are the industry. Right. You are it. Yeah. Like you don't have to ask permission, like Erick says, from anyone.
Yeah, don't ask permission.
Like you are there to tell a story. The actual visual effect, is the story.
Because if you ask for permission, they're going to say, just make another Ghostbusters. It's
exactly. Like, no. Just do it and ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah. Because what people want is to be moved by what they see. Yeah. That's it. And and what they're watching is characters having emotions on screen. That's what they're there to see. And everything else is a tool. The effects are a tool. The set is a tool. The distributor is a tool. The studio is a tool. Like these are tools for you. Like if you're working super huge, if you're working with millions and millions of dollars, the studio doesn't control you. You are using them to access millions of people. They are the tool. And if you own that, then you'll have it.
It's very inspiring to hear you guys saying this, and I hope it goes out and inspires other filmmakers to make more movies and to start from that perspective. And I'm curious that as we're kind of wrapping up, what's next for you guys, as maybe both as filmmakers, also including the technology that is demonstrated, the project arena. But what comes next?
Chris, that's you.
Go.
So yeah, I mean, so we talk about, like we said, we jokingly talk about movies all the time on Martini Giant, but this was us sort of saying, can we put the proof in the pudding, right? Can we actually do something, right? And so we did. So we just this is how we would manifest itself. And this proved itself in many ways. One, that, creatively, as well as how we can take advantage of new ideas and new technology, both technically and creatively. So this has been a sort of a big deal for us. I know that Vlado and people in the Innovation Lab has seen this as a big success as well. Not only has this proven that we can use something like this to really try something, but it's also been a big testament to, we've had a lot of people. It's like, oh yeah, you guys, I heard about Project Arena, and then they see the short and it's like, oh, this isn't just talk. You guys, this is real. This is a real thing, and it's ready for prime time. So I think to them, seeing this in a real setting is good. And if it feels like a real movie, then it's better, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we're looking at continuing to expand this idea. I think seeing, what we can do creatively, and looking at all the things that are coming out of a lab and saying, oh, how do we use this? It almost feels a little bit like James Bond hanging out at Q's, things like, oh, what does this thing do? It's like, I could use this for previs.
That's
and
good.
so there's a lot of that kind of idea that we're sort of thinking about, and giving us the freedom to think about where we want to take filmmaking in general. And I think this is it. This, for us, I think that there's an opportunity to look at tools as opposed to the ones that are driving the narrative, right? So I think this is a different way of approaching. A lot of times you'll see people let the technology drive the filmmaking as opposed to the filmmaking driving the technology.
A lot, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Is there any release dates? Any I don't know, not announcements, but
way too
anything
early
you want
to
to
do
share
that,
with people?
But
Yeah.
it's too early to give you any of that. But we definitely have been very ambitious about taking Martini Giant beyond the podcast. The podcast still very much exists, and definitely go check it out.
It'd be really funny if our first film is like Avengers 20. It's like, what?
Exactly. All green screen.
And we're on all green screen, but we're going to do a blue screen. We're going to change the business. We're just going to say, let's just all do
But
blue.
no, we actually do want to, continue. With these two guys, it's almost impossible not to have several scripts in the making and working on. So we have several features that we have ambitions to do. And so for us, we're just sort of looking at when do we take this part and put them together and make something interesting out of it. And it inspires us, right? Like the virtual production idea was like, well, what can we do with this? Where can we take advantage of this? And we looked at a train was the obvious thing for us, right? So, and then so it's like, okay, that becomes part of our story as well, and it becomes part of the journey, and so it sort of works with us at the same time.
Expect to see advances in Project Arena at some point. It becomes available.
Well, real time is, that's the thing that I think was really cool, is that real time is the thing, right? But there's roles for offline rendering, but there's also big roles for real time rendering, and real time rendering will inspire filmmakers in so many ways. To me, Arena is currently obviously works with with virtual production walls, and that's really what it does. Arena is basically wrapping Vantage and giving it a way to distribute across walls. But I also believe that Arena is going to become a proxy for a camera, right? So I believe that digital twins of cameras are going to become more and more important. And when I can bring CG directly to people like the director of photography and a director and put it in their hands,
Yes.
as opposed to them having to shoot something and 9 months later saying, okay, now I guess to see what it looks like. I think when they actually see it through the lens, as Richard says, at the time of exposure, and I know what it's going to look like, then I'm done, right? It's done. So, and the only way that's going to work is if it's done in real time and also done in ray tracing, because I believe that ray tracing is the only answer to true proper lighting.
Ray tracing for the win.
Yes, for the win.
As they say.
Well done.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for being on today. Before we go, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience? Any places they can follow you? I know that we'll probably drop links for Martini Giant and for the CG Garage and for Chaos
We
Group.
have a new podcast out last night.
We did. We have a new podcast out today. We did actually one on Westerns. We covered Logan, which we argue is a Western. And we paired that with the movie Shane from 1953, which is directly referenced in Logan. So it's one
and
of the
I think
rare
I did one of my best images of Dan.
Yeah,
it's
as a small child.
Not
As a
to
small
bury the
child.
lead, but yeah, like
So
it
awesome.
took the kid from Shane, and now the kid from Shane has this nasty little beard and a very squinty face, and it's me. It's
I did it
hysterical.
last night or something. I was like,
But I also, we are on YouTube. So if you want to follow us on YouTube, it's youtube.com/@martinigiant. But we also have a Discord. So if you guys want to be on our Discord, there's lots of movie discussions and stuff that happens there. It's a fun place. So go follow us on our Discord as well. And that's, we can give you the link to that as well in the description. So, yeah. So, and then, if you love movies, that's what we do.
That's the whole thing. We can't shut up about them.
Can't shut up about it.
You make movies
Just like
longer.
you're witnessing now, but you can't shut up.
no, thank you
it's
for
great.
having
I
us.
knew that.
Yeah.
No, of course. Thank you guys for being on. I'm like you guys. I'm a film and CG nerd, so this has been tremendous fun for me to get to do this, and I'm very, very enthusiastic about encouraging people to do the same thing. I was in my talk yesterday in Seattle. I said the same thing you guys are saying. I started with story. I didn't start with talking about virtual production tools, and I'm very enthusiastic about the message that comes through the movie, about the tech advances that you guys are doing, about your enthusiasm is infectious to me as well, and very encouraging, I think, to people watching this. I hope to go out there and make your own movies and try it and experiment with it. So yeah, it's been very inspiring to me to get to do this today, and thank you all. I
do want to say, I know we were talking about filmmaking and about stuff that we did at Martini, but honestly, none of this would have been possible if it wasn't for the guys in Sofia who had built these tools, right? They are the ones who sat there and made this thing happen.
Yeah.
And the Innovation Lab was great. And what was really the short itself is sort of an honor to what they've put out there. And because they made some really interesting. It's very hard as a developer. You make these tools and you sometimes get to see what you do. They saw directly what they created manifest itself into a story. And I was so happy to make that happen for them. So those guys are really, really cool. So I want to make a big shout out to all the developers in the Innovation Lab for bringing that together, and the Vantage team especially.
Great people.
Yeah.
Great people, great work.
Rightly so. Well, I look forward to seeing the next things that you crazy people make, and I again thank you for taking the time out of your day to share it. We're very happy to share what you guys are doing with the world. So yeah,
appreciate it.
Also,
Thank you
thanks to everybody watching or listening to this. And yeah, again, we're CG Pro as a school. We have an open day coming up on October the 10th with the Joker theme. So come and check out some fun, creative things around that movie. And you can follow us and look forward to another episode in a couple of weeks. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.